From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Good evening and welcome to the special edition of Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Edgardo Lozoya. Cronkite News is dedicated to covering law enforcement policy and judicial affairs across Arizona. Tonight, some of our top coverage of the government and justice beat.
Working together is bringing in more money to law enforcement in the Tucson area. The Tucson Police Department was recently awarded a grant by the U.S. Department of Justice for nearly $750,000. Reporter Micah Bledsoe spoke with the department and others in Pima County on this collaborative approach they are taking to tackle issues in their community.
Over the past 2 years, the Tucson Police Department, the Pima County Attorney's Office, and other agencies in the community have worked together to apply for grant funding to improve the community's response to sexual assault and domestic violence victims. More recently, they have focused on Spanish-speaking victims. 38% of Hispanic women in Arizona have experienced sexual violence at some point in their life, according to the CDC.
Currently, in the domestic violence unit, there are no Spanish-speaking detectives. Along with the sexual assaults unit, there's no Spanish-speaking detectives.
Amelia Kramer, Chief Deputy Pima County Attorney, says domestic violence is pervasive and extremely epidemic in her community. Those in her office, along with others, have been looking for funding to fix this issue.
We want to make sure that they can talk to a detective who is fluent in their language so that they can better communicate with the victim about what risk she or he is facing for future violence, connect that victim up with services to provide emergency housing, counseling, support, child support, legal services, those kinds of things.
The grant awarded to the police department will be used to hire and train 2 new bilingual detectives who will work specifically on these types of cases. It will also help to train 10 sexual assault nurse examiners at Tucson Medical Center in strangulation protocols and the use of medical Spanish.
And it's really important when the detectives go out and speak with victims to have that empathy and to build a rapport with them because something traumatic has happened. And a lot of times when you have someone translating from a detective to a translator, then to the victim, it kind of can get lost in translations.
On average, the Tucson Police Department responds to 26 calls per day relating to domestic violence. That's more than 9,300 calls per year. The Pima County Attorney's Office and Tucson City Prosecutor's Office prosecute, on average, 5,000 felony and misdemeanor domestic violence cases each year. Sergeant Petty says the department works closely with Emerge to better serve the community.
Our detectives work really closely with the advocates and making sure the victims have all the resources they need and have rides to court and essentially just have an advocate on their side to walk them through the process of how to obtain orders of protection and things of that sort.
Tasha Miniker from the Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence says it's important to have culturally specific services.
And when people have experienced trauma, it can be helpful for them to speak to someone who speaks the same language as them, who understands their culture. It can help them on the healing process. It can create a safer space for them.
In Tucson, Micah Bledsoe, Cronkite News.
The 2 new detectives the police department select are expected to begin their new positions on the job prior to the start of January 2019. There are more than 200 people who are missing in Maricopa County, with some cases dating back to the 1950s. The 4th annual Missing in Arizona Day is on October 27th. Law enforcement will be on hand at Arizona State University's West Campus to take reports and gather information and identifiers from families of missing persons. Cronkite News reporter Holly Bernstein went to the Maricopa County Office of the Medical Examiner to find out how missing people are identified.
There's very different situations in which we have to deal with our own feelings and our own emotions. But these cases where families are looking for somebody that crossed the desert and they don't know what happened with them are probably the most difficult ones because there is no closure for many of these families.
Lillian Cordoba works with the Consulate General of Mexico. Her team is notified when remains of a missing person are found. Many of the cases she works with involve people who went missing while crossing into the U.S. from Mexico.
Many of those are not identified immediately or for long periods of time.
The Maricopa County Office of the Medical Examiner is raising awareness for missing people ahead of the 4th annual Missing in Arizona Day. Families are encouraged to bring photographs, medical records, and fingerprints of their missing loved ones. Forensic anthropologist Laura Fulgeniti works to identify remains from cases across Arizona.
My job is to develop a biological profile, including the sex of the individual, the age that they died, the height of the person, and then anything unique or individual about them that will help us identify them.
Remains of teeth such as these are another way that you can identify a missing person. Anything from a crown to a filling to an x-ray can be of help. Cordoba says identifying a missing person can bring closure to their families.
It's also hard because they cannot even see their relative for a last time. But at least they have a conclusion to their case, to their questions, and that gives them certain peace of mind.
In Phoenix, Holly Bernstein, Cronkite News.
A support group will also be held at Missing in Arizona Day for family members with a missing loved one, and a candlelight ceremony to honor the missing will be held at 3 p.m. Last year, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office closed Tent City Jail and announced that the space be used to treat inmates with substance abuse issues. Reporter Micah Bledsoe has more on how Mosaic is impacting lives.
You know, I feel freer today than I've ever felt in my entire life.
Christopher Thomas recently graduated from Mosaic. He struggled with a heroin addiction that left him in and out of jail much of his life. He's been in Arizona for the past 5 months, which is also the longest he's kept his sobriety.
Today, even though I am incarcerated, I feel like I'm the freest man in the world. I've been in chains and in bondage by my addiction and my pain and the torment that I was subjected to as a child for a long time.
The closure of former Tent City Jail saved the sheriff's office $20 million. $1 million was reinvested into staffing for detention officers for the Mosaic program. Now, those officers are able to help 700 to 800 inmates annually, compared to 350 a year.
If we can help drug addicts recover from that challenge and get them back to a place where they're healthy, the probability of recidivism is reduced, which means that they're productive in society, they're hopefully not a threat, and we're reducing costs in the jails, and we're also making the community a safer place.
Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery chairs the Arizona Substance Abuse Partnership and says helping someone with substance abuse has a cascading effect.
Someone's underlying substance abuse behavior is addressed, then that's one less property crime, one less victim, one less scenario in which somebody has to take time off of work, has to make an insurance claim.
With nothing but his faith pushing him forward, Thomas says the jail in Maricopa is unlike any other he's been to.
Every institution, every jail, every prison needs a program exactly like this. Not one like it, but one exactly like this program. This program is phenomenal, and it's gave me my life back.
In Phoenix, Micah Bledsoe, Cronkite News.
Since Mosaic replaced former Tent City Jail, it has rehabilitated more than 22 classes of inmates. A caravan of thousands of migrants is headed towards the U.S. border from Central America.
U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis is expected to sign a deployment order that would send 800 troops to the Mexican border to join the National Guard, which has already been deployed. Cronkite News reporter Holly Bernstein is tracking the latest.
These troops could arrive as early as next week, but as of yet, the order has not been signed.
Wait till you see what happens over the next couple of weeks. You're going to see a very secure border. You just watch. Just watch. Very secure. And the military is ready. They're all set.
U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis is responding to a request from President Donald Trump. Trump is calling the caravan of immigrants heading to the border a national emergency. Brian Kovodrilis is one of those in the caravan. He says he spent most of his life in Texas until he was deported to Honduras a few weeks ago. He's walking back to reunite with his 3-year-old daughter.
She's the one who actually needs me the most, you know, so, and I don't want her to grow up without me.
Others hope for a better future.
There isn't any work there. We have nothing to live on.
The caravan is about 1,000 miles from the border. There are already more than 400 National Guard troops deployed along the Arizona-Mexico border in the Tucson sector, according to Customs and Border Protection. The troops will not be authorized to use lethal force to stop the migrants. The plan is for them to provide fencing, wall materials, and other technical support. This summer, additional funding for the National Guard troops was approved by the U.S. Department of Defense to keep them at the border through September 2019. And a few hundred migrants who have reached Mexico voluntarily agreed to return to their home countries. But Mexican immigration officials have started to process asylum requests for nearly 3,000 Central Americans. In the broadcast center, Holly Bernstein, Cronkite News.
More than a year after Trump held a rally at the Phoenix Convention Center, the president will be back, this time at Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport. The focus will be on endorsing Senate candidate Martha McSally and discussing his America First agenda. Reporter Jimmy Jackson looks at how people are planning for tomorrow.
Bikers for Trump and anti-Trump protesters are preparing for another rally in Arizona. Jim Williams has been a Riders USA member for 15 years. He says that the idea for Bikers for Trump came when he made a sign that caught the attention of other bikers. The reason they go to rallies, he says, is because in the past there has been a lot of protests and threats of protests of the rallies, and people were becoming afraid to attend.
You know, we stay outside to escort people in their cars if they want it, you know, if they're afraid to walk to the car, because if there is protesters that they feel uncomfortable, we'll walk into their cars. We're basically there just to ensure the people that want to get in to see the president can do it without being harassed.
Last year, chaos during Trump's rally in Phoenix ended with police using tear gas to disperse crowds. Mike Roberts, a protest organizer on Facebook, wants to make it known that they do not welcome Trump's ideology and are encouraging people to get out and vote in the upcoming midterm elections.
Our opportunity to actually make change happen right now isn't about protesting. We're not going to unelect Trump or whatever. I mean, he is here to endorse Martha McSally, and so I would say, you know, if you don't like Trump, then you probably aren't going to like Martha McSally.
This year, the ACLU filed a lawsuit over the Phoenix Police Department's handling of last year's rally protests, and they hope the Mesa Police Department will act in a better way. Communications Director Steve Kyler wants people to still report any wrong actions if they see it.
It's very difficult to challenge police actions on the street. It's much better to document as much of it as you can and challenge that after the fact.
Williams says he hopes the rally goes smoothly and acknowledged that protesters have as much of a right to protest as people have to attend Trump's rallies without fear of their safety. In Phoenix, Jimmy Jackson, Cronkite News.
Roberts says that he thinks Charlottesville had a lot to do with last year's rally chaos and does not think there will be as much conflict this year.
Immigration just was one of the many issues President Donald Trump spoke about during his Make America Great Again rally on Friday. Reporter Gabriela Baquero was at the Phoenix Mesa Gateway Airport and tells us who President Trump wants Arizonans to vote for.
President Donald Trump has a focus on keeping Arizona a red state, and he made that clear by endorsing multiple Republican candidates on Friday. He spoke about issues such as immigration, health care, and others that he says could be affected if the Democratic Party wins in the upcoming midterm election.
Everything we do, they can destroy very quickly if the wrong people get into office.
President Donald Trump endorsed Republican Senate candidate Martha McSally at his Make America Great Again rally.
Your vote in this election will decide which party controls Congress. And I will tell you, they're all talking about Arizona, and they're talking about Martha McSally.
He says McSally is a courageous fighter and the person Arizona needs in Washington.
It will be the second greatest vote you ever cast. The first greatest vote was for me.
McSally joined Trump on stage to talk about her campaign and her take on immigration.
This is personal for us in Arizona. We have to crack down on sanctuary cities, MS-13 gangs, build the wall, and secure the border. So there's so much at stake.
Trump also endorsed incumbent gubernatorial Republican candidate Doug Ducey.
We have a great Republican slate, House and Senate and our legislative races. But I want to level with you. We can't do this without you.
Ducey helped welcome Trump to Arizona and stands by Trump's desire to keep Arizona a red state.
Under Republican leadership, America is booming, America is thriving, and America is winning because we are finally putting America first.
In response, Kyrsten Sinema's campaign launched a coalition, Republicans for Sinema, and released the following statement. Arizonans don't care if you have an R or D next to your name. We care about getting things done. My approach has always been to work across the aisle to solve problems and deliver results for Arizonans, and that's what I'll continue to do as U.S. Senator. Arizonans deserve a senator who isn't distracted by partisan games and who is focused on fighting for them. As Arizona's next senator, I'll be an independent voice for all Arizonans. Early voting in Arizona has already begun. On both sides, Republican and Democratic Party leaders are encouraging everyone to get out and vote. In downtown Phoenix, Gabriela Becerra, Cronkite News.
Supporters showed up in droves to the president's rally on Monday. Sammy Giebers was reporting from the outside of the International Air Response hangar in Mesa.
I spoke to supporters who were there, many as early as 9 a.m. for the evening rally. They told me they liked the direction the nation is heading. Now, there were a few protesters there as well who would disagree. We talked to both sides on why they decided to come out. Thousands of people showed up to President Trump's rally, among them Butch Dukeman.
Hey, there's these nice gals.
A top issue for him, immigration. He supports the president's wall and thinks Trump is pushing the country in the right direction. Many in the crowd would agree. Dukeman, like so many others, waited in the heat. For many, nothing but a red Make America Great Again hat to block out the sun.
I said you would be back.
Charlotte Gamble has been out here since 9:30 a.m. and wasn't let in until 2:30 in the afternoon. She's worried about the country turning socialist. She's a mom and thinks the president is making the country safer for her children. Protesters were hard to find during the afternoon, but supporters were plenty, and many told us they even made friends in line. This is Desi Brousseau. She came up to Mesa from Tucson by herself. She's a millennial, but she says she's not a typical one. She says those surrounding her are much more in line with her views.
So we heard from people waiting in line for the rally. Now, let's see what the other side has to say.
While thousands showed up in support of Trump, only a few dozen protesters lined up against them. But this is where the crowd was at its loudest. This is Kirk Linden. He called the president a dangerous fool.
No, actually, I'm not.
He describes the rally as cult-like.
Good for you, so far.
Bikers for Trump, they would disagree. Rose Myth says that if she didn't come down here today, she would be tossing and turning at night. She believes the country is in ruins and says the nation deserves a president who respects women. Her sign, you can't fix stupid, but you can vote it out. Alec Bradshaw is a student. He said he should be studying right now and he's missing hours as a server, but he's out here with protesters. He thinks the president, quote, isn't doing a thing for students like him. The man next to him is Chad Ness. He says he's out here because of the amount of corruption he believes is happening in this administration. When he described the president, the word he used was liar. I also spoke with supporters after the rally who said they found President Trump's speech inspiring. Even though there were heated conversations between the two sides, Mesa police confirmed no one was arrested. In the broadcast center, Sammy Giebers, Cronkite News.
CNN, the Clintons, the Obamas, and several more Democratic leaders are among the targets of suspicious devices mailed around the country, leading to evacuations, bomb squad calls, and concerns about domestic terrorism. President Donald Trump said a federal investigation is now underway.
In these times, we have to unify. We have to come together and send one very clear, strong, unmistakable message that acts or threats of political violence of any kind have no place in the United States of America.
Jeff Flake was near the Time Warner Center when the building was evacuated. So far, there have been no suspicious packages reported in Arizona. Reporter Gabriela Becerra spoke with a venue security specialist who explains what you should watch out for.
But just a question, is this right?
Stephen Adelman specializes in venue security and says every office should have an emergency plan with a bomb threat checklist, which includes checking mail before opening it.
There are more obvious things like the package is wet or leaking, or there is a wire hanging out of it, or it's taped in a really obsessive manner. These are all typical telltale signs of a package that is a suspicious package.
The package sent to CNN was in a manila envelope and covered in tape, with addresses printed and taped to the front. Adelman says the events of this morning will not change the precautions high-profile people take.
The world hasn't changed for ordinary people just doing their thing, nor have the events of this morning changed the safety concerns and precautions for the Clintons or the Obamas or for CNN.
He says political leaders and newsrooms are always high-profile targets.
They all have procedures in place, and they were all in place yesterday, and they will continue to be in place today and tomorrow.
Senator Jeff Flake was near the Time Warner building when it was evacuated after a mailroom employee alerted security of the suspicious package.
This is horrible. That anytime anybody's threatened like this is not good. So there's been a lot of this going around lately.
Flake says both sides, Democratic and Republican, need to be more civil.
So we've got to tone down the rhetoric, both sides. Got to see people as opponents but not enemies.
In Phoenix, Gabriela Becerra, Cronkite News.
Adelman says that if someone receives a suspicious package, they should not open it and report it to the police immediately.
Meanwhile, some voters are reporting problems they've had retrieving their early ballots. Voters have also reported other problems pertaining to their ballots as well. Cronkite News reporter Holly Bernstein looked into the problem to find out how voters can make sure they get their ballots in time for the election.
It took me a moment to realize that it actually was a real ballot.
Megan Gallopi lives with her husband and 3 cats in Arizona, a state where she has been registered to vote in since she was 18.
Since I'm a registered independent, for the primary I had to go online and tell them which ballot I wanted. And I remember seeing a question as to whether or not I wanted a large print ballot. I did not check that.
But the large ballot arrived on her doorstep.
Took some photos, thought it was funny, but realized that it was a real ballot, and so I used it, mailed it in.
Gallopi says she called the Maricopa County Recorder's office to let them know she did not want to receive any more large print ballots, which are intended for voters with disabilities. She received another one for the general election and has reached out again to correct the issue. Other voters have contacted County Recorder Adrian Fontes, concerned that they have not received their ballot.
Usually we ask that on October 17th, which is already a couple of days ago, if you haven't received your ballot by then, to contact our office, and we've been experiencing a high volume of calls.
Fontes says voters who have not received their ballots or have damaged their ballot can call their office and order a new one. Voters out of state who have not received their ballots should also call. Any early voters who have not received their ballot or have other concerns can also visit any early voting centers such as this one at the County Recorder's office to come in person to vote and make sure that their vote is submitted on time. Gallopi says she plans to call the Recorder's office after the general election.
Just make sure that you talk to someone.
In Maricopa County, Holly Bernstein, Cronkite News.
The midterm elections are 2 weeks from today, and the deadline to get a mail-in ballot is this Friday. Voters should remember to make sure all the information is up to date, including their address, before requesting a ballot.
In past years, youth voters have had low voter turnout, but this year it appears the youth stepped it up in the midterm election. Cronkite News reporter John Cardinelli talked with a couple of organizations that are working on promoting voting for current and future generations.
This year at ASU's campus in Tempe, the student line to vote seemed larger than usual.
It's very important given the fact that we live in a society where most of the people that vote are older, and it's important to get everybody's voice.
A voice that seemed to be absent in past elections was the youth voice, but this year there was a change.
We saw a drastic increase of young people being paying attention, being engaged, being interested, getting actually registered to vote. And then we've seen in early vote, it was a 200% increase. So we doubled the number of young people in the early vote period here in Arizona.
Next Gen promotes voting to already eligible youth. This year, they helped register over 21,000 young voters.
We saw candidates running this year that looked like us, that came from our communities, and we were really inspired to vote for them and for that vision of the world we could have.
While youth vote was up, turnout was still lower than other age groups.
Reasons that a lot of young people don't vote is because they feel like they don't have enough information. They're not sure how the process works.
Kids Voting Arizona is doing just that. They are informing students who can't yet vote on the voting process.
You have to start them early, like with anything. You have to get them started on their education early and the practice of voting, and not only voting, but informed voting.
Kids Voting Arizona goes to schools in Maricopa County and puts on a mock election, so students can feel like they are a part of the voting process.
When we were having the 3rd, 4th, 5th, especially the middle school students and the high school students, they were really focused on making sure that they read what the candidate was about and then making their decision.
Getting the next generation informed is important, especially because young voters are such a big demographic.
If we all turned out to vote, we would be the decisive factor in elections up and down the ticket, and we already have seen that in some of the results we got back yesterday.
In Phoenix, John Cardinelli, Cronkite News.
Both organizations believe that with the information they provide, the number of young voters will continue to increase.
That's it for Cronkite News tonight. Thanks for joining us. For top Arizona stories anytime, go to cronkitenews.azpbs.org.